started, I think the first question which we had, as agency and as well as from our clients was how strategic is digital marketing for your business today? Is it more tactical or more strategic, and how do you look at it?
I think it's a combination of it. If you really ask me, when I get to speak to the sales, it's always tactical. When it goes to more towards the CEOs and building up the brand and sustaining the brand in the long term, it goes into more strategic route. So I would say digital is way strategic today. Uh, Mostly from the brand perspective, but when it comes to the functional or the on ground job as well, it has become very strategic. And digital being so fast moving, I think the whole idea is to have the strategies placed but revisit those strategies very fast, rather than having a strategy which is way too long, probably a year or more longer strategy. So but yeah,
Right.
it's very strategic.
Historically, mutual funds have always been sold through distributors, right? So given that, the product has never had its share of pull. It's always been a very push driven product, right? So as marketers, we've always been present in channels where distributors typically get influenced, and that way they take the product to the end customer. But what's happened over the last 5 to 8 years, and primarily driven through regulatory changes and a completely new generation of customers who are coming in, right? What's happened is there is an emergence of pull that we are seeing. Obviously things like demonetization, GST, financial inclusion, these sort of shifts have had its reasons as to why there is a pull that is emerging into mutual funds as a category. So that's really given the shift as marketers to digital, right? And from that perspective, I would say that we never looked at digital strategically till 3 4 years ago. But I think as an industry, and I might want to wear the industry hat here, and not just for Sundaram Mutual, but I think the industry looks at digital strategically today, primarily because there is a need for us to start engaging with the end customer more from content. And it's a great channel to listen to customers, and then it's also to provide customers a servicing channel, right? So today you have hundreds and thousands of customers who want to be serviced directly through mutual fund companies, right? They may not want to go through a distributor for various reasons, right? And digital is probably the best way to go and reach those customers, right? So it's a great way to engage, great way to listen, and then great way to actually connect with those customers. So digital is highly strategic today, and it's probably now moved to a model where we look at digital not just from a marketing perspective, like the way Omkar talked about, in terms of automation, in terms of channels of transaction itself, right? So digital is not just marketing. Digital goes beyond the scope of marketing itself.
Sure. And is your, like, from both your experiences, are like CEOs and senior board advisors as well getting involved in asking, like, what are we doing from a digital innovation perspective, or it's more from like the marketing angle where we still look at the digital?
Yeah. So yeah, strategically. So clearly, there is a senior management perspective that digital has taken shape. It's a key priority area. Like I said again, right? So it's important for us to look at digital not just as a marketing tool. Yes, it is that's where you acquire customers. That's where you keep customers, retain customers, and engage the customers. But the entire digital journey, right, where like the Neha example that Omkar talked about, right? So today you have a completely new generation of customers who want to access product like mutual funds, who need to be acquired, nurtured, retained, and engaged with digitally. Right. So clearly that's a digital first world that you're talking about. So it is a key priority area, and we've got the board asking us questions every quarter on where we spend. Obviously, we'll come to that. Spends is a very important element on digital itself. But yeah, it's a key priority area as far as the management is concerned.
If we are looking at it, is not only the digital journey starts when marketing comes in, but believe me, a lot of research is happening on digital spaces with respect to the products or services itself. So before even the products or services are thought of, a lot of research starts. Product is built, then comes pre-sales, sales, marketing, customer loyalty programs, CRM, everywhere. Believe me, the way groups are looking at or the companies are looking at is the entire transformation from stage one to the end, and everything is based on to what customers are looking out for, what's the need of the market, and how do we build up the products and services, how do we market them, what are the channels where they are, how do we reach out to the right people at the right time in terms of where they are into their buying stage. So digital is pretty much everywhere in my view.
It's a pretty recent phenomenon where senior leaders are now asking what's happening on the digital front, and more discussions, even with CEOs and sales heads, getting involved in what's happening from an innovation perspective. So the topic of this panel was actually pushing the frontiers. So innovation, I think both of you all have been working a lot on innovation in the digital space. So it'll be great if you all can share a little bit about how you all think of innovation in digital, and how you're implementing it in the coming year as well.
When we look at innovation, for us, innovation is twofold. One is product level innovation itself, right? So some of you may be aware that we've just gone through a phase where there's been what we call recategorization of products, right? So a whole bunch of products went out of the market, and we had to recategorize them as far as SEBI is concerned. So what's happened now is maybe in the future you're going to see a situation where mutual fund companies are going to go move towards solution based product offerings itself, rather than just a large cap, mid cap, small cap, multi cap kind of that'll happen. And that as long as the product gaps need to be filled, you will find such launches happening. But innovation will come in that area of building curated solution based, goal based offerings to specific customer segments, right? And digital will play a big role there.
Personalization.
Personalized products,
Sure.
bespoke them to a segment of customers. And I would think that digital is perhaps the easiest way to reach those customers. Whether you want to go B2B or B2C,
Right.
Digital is the best way to get there, right? So that's on the product innovation side. On the marketing and sales side is the other, what I would say tactical innovation that is emerging now is, now you have a ton of data, right? You have hundreds and thousands of customers. I think, each reasonable sized AMC will have about 2 million, 3 million active customers, if not more. That's a lot of consumers today, right? And 60 to 70% of those may be active customers, who I'm saying essentially are recurring customers who are coming back and buying another product, right? So the key question is now, how do you start targeted selling to these customers, right? So we're moving from just bombarding them with content and display ads or search ads or posts and engagements and video content to extremely data driven marketing models, right? So for example, we need to start looking at profiling customers, right? Can I have a segment of customers who say, when I say, look, there are customers who are aged between 25 to 35. You get demographic information. If you go deeper, you'll probably get credit score also, right? So you add all these things together, you're looking at building profiles for customers,
Right.
and then you can start recommending, suggesting products itself based on customer profile, and then you give it to them in 3 clicks, right? So you're moving this entire uh, customer acquisition model more from a data bent of mind, where you don't really go and look at mass targeting, but you go and micro target customers based on your own segment, right? So essentially you're cross selling different products. So that's
Right.
the next leg of innovation that is happening. As a company, we've started making
A
progress
long
there.
journey.
And it's a long journey. It's something which will pay off over time.
We at our end are trying to first understand as to what is it that the customer is looking out for, and we have looked at the kind of success and the negatives that we have done with respect to products or services, but a lot of it is the listening of the entire digital clutter, not only about the brand, about the entire industry, has helped us be very innovative with the products in terms of what is being consumed and what has a market. And then a lot of the different innovations in terms of doing the content pieces, like the we saw it beautifully into the content slides onto the Google as to what are the touch points that the customer has in the different buying stages. I think innovations are there with respect to the content pieces that can be built. Innovations are there in terms of stories which are being built. Innovations are in terms of how it can be disseminated through multiple different technological
Channels.
ways, channels. So I think innovation is being played everywhere, but the key is pretty much again understanding what is it that can be sold, build the product, and market it where your people are, what they are looking out for in terms of sale.
So, I think since you handle both, I think both your businesses have both a B2B and a B2C component, channel partners in real estate, distributors and mutual funds. Could you describe like innovation from a distributor and a B2B perspective? How is that shaping up compared to a B2C perspective?
I think it's a very different ballgame when it comes to B2B versus B2C. The idea in B2C is one of the examples that we have already seen is reaching out to the audience very, very fast
Sure.
and to a very large scale. But when it comes to B2B, I think very targeted, very niche messaging, reaching out to them in a very specific ways, making the things available to them,
Right.
the guys, in terms of their needs, and fulfilling those needs is the way to go about B2B. The very specific influence is very important in B2B as compared to reaching out to masses in B2C scenario. So the content type differs very clearly into B2B space. The audience differs, so the entire messaging,
The innovation is a very different.
it is a different ball game altogether.
Again, some context here. B2B is not very straightforward because we've got multiple categories of distributors. What in the industry we call IFA, bank, ND. I usually look at it as unorganized and organized. Right. So you have the banks and the national distributors who are largely organized. They, when I say organized, they're large corporates, right?
Sure.
Who distribute mutual fund products. And then you have the unorganized segment, essentially, who are the independent financial advisors. Now the key question is, how do you really engage with these two channels, right? Frankly, we are learning every day. One of the things that we have seen very closely is to look at specific channels of communication to see if you can actually engage. Because look, at the end of the day, the distributors look at performance of products, and it's in our industry is very tangible and very factual data, right? So it's performance of products, commercials, and a brand that they're comfortable with, right? So but that's really the challenge for us in terms of how can you really look at influencing these distributors, because at the end of the day, again, while it's performance, pricing and relationship, it's reasonably commoditized at the end of the day, right? So the more commoditized it is, that much more the challenge in terms of how do you really engage with them, right? So one of the things we have seen right now is to see if you can actually build a ground up pool itself, right? So there are consumers who are customers of these wealth channels, right? Either the bank or the national distribution channel. So can you use a platform like LinkedIn, for example, right? Which is a very powerful tool, right? And can you start influencing customers to make can you create a pull for your product through the customer, right? Bottom up, essentially, right? And also start engaging with those distributors
Distributors
and the customers. So that's a blended strategy we look at. On the B2C side, I think the canvas is wide open, right? There are multiple generations of customers who have either tasted mutual funds or haven't tasted mutual funds, and there's a ton of things that you can do, right? And we have seen, on the B2C side, you can, obviously there are multiple things that we have done in the last few quarters, and the canvas is a lot wider there for you to really engage. B2B is still something, because you're really talking about a very niche set of users, right? About 30 to 35,000.
I think our maturity curve also as a digital ecosystem is less for B2B, right? Would you agree with that? Or?
Correct. Maturity curve is less, but I think the challenge is, see, I think most of them are moved digitally, right? Increasingly, when I go around the market, when I talk to distributors, simple things of collaterals, they don't want physical collaterals anymore. Everyone's saying, look, no paper, give me digital collateral. So they've also moved digitally. They don't want, letters and all this, say, email, WhatsApps. No, that's how they want to communicate. But I think the key question is, there is a big opportunity in terms of differentiating in terms of content itself. How are we going to engage with them? What sort of tools are you going to give them? So we have seen small examples, empowering them with analytics, especially the unorganized side. The organized side is slightly different because they work for large banks and distribution houses. But on the unorganized side, you can give them a lot of digital tools, campaign tools, for example, for them to, you're empowering them with their own data, right? For them to run cross-sell, upsell campaigns to their own customers, right? So we've seen those sort of innovations playing out well.
Right. And how do you all look at spends, Vipin? And I think probably, because both of y'all have done large campaigns over the last 6 to 12 months, how has that been in terms of ROI and, transformation of your organizations as well? Like what processes are you all putting in place to match those spends?
I think just to add on what Ajit said is B2B is solely a game of industry. and the game completely changes with each industry. When it comes to real estate, or for mutual funds, or when it comes to pharma, I could hear one of the gentlemen asking about pharma. The game is so different over there. The type of audience is way, way different. The way they engage is so different. Anybody in the pharma industry, where the clients are probably in US and European region, would interact very, very differently. And LinkedIn may be a great channel, but when it comes to, let's say, the local real estate market, would LinkedIn work? It's a big question, right?
Right.
And we all have tried our ways of whether it is LinkedIn or whether it is apps. I would agree to Ajit that localized B2B partners would need more of the applications and the way to communicate, a way to understand the brands better, be always updated.
Like mobile app.
Mobile apps,
Sure.
right? Mobile apps, there can be different ways of engaging and getting the data through those apps as to how
Sure.
the channel partners or the distributors are consuming or using those apps to further communicate with their end consumers or customers. Make their life super easy so that they can save a lot of money uh, by not getting into the multiple campaigns,
Right.
where they can save money and they use those apps to actually engage with their and consumers, and that's one way of getting a lot of data back to the brands as well.
Right.
So there are multiple ways, but yeah,
Sure.
it does. You were asking some of the
On
questions.
the advertising spends, no, very valid point on, and as a percentage of your overall marketing spends, where is digital today? And as part of the strategic shift, is it moving, more towards digital?
I think if you really ask me, at Piramal Group, there are two things that we are doing digitally. Is we are not just looking at the campaigns, but we are looking at the entire transformation. And like I said earlier, from product, services, research level to getting into the market, sales, pre-sales, to customer acquisition,
Right.
and then the CRM aspect of it. We divide money in two ways. One is that goes in building up the systems for the transformation itself, and then comes to the marketing campaign, which is further acquiring the customer, and then the loyalty programs. I would say still a large amount of money goes towards the acquisition and loyalty programs.
Right.
Majorly because maybe the largely the budgets are controlled by the businesses and sales,
Sure.
but still a very good amount of money is going from each of the organization, in my perspective, towards the transformation side as well.
Right.
So B2B might be some, I would say, it's still less. I would say it's 4 to 5% maybe
Sure.
on the digital side of it. But when it comes to B2C businesses, I've seen the money jumping somewhere around in the range of 10 to 15% as well as of today.
Okay.
And when it comes to transformation within the entire budgets, I think about 25% of the money businesses have started putting in building up the transformation and getting ready to build up those systems where you get the data from doing the campaigns, and how do you utilize that data.
Right. And these percentages, Vipin, will be higher in 2019 compared to 2018?
So
or?
if we go 2 years back, they were merely 1 to 1.5%, and transformation, I would say there was hardly any budget with the organizations. Sure. And when I say it has gone to about 20% in last 2 years towards transformation, the budgets are increasing. Merely from 2%, we have seen about 10 to 15% budgets now going towards digital. That doesn't mean the budgets are being cut down probably on the other aspects of it, whether it is TV or print or others. Overall, budgets are increasing. It's more about understanding the consumers, whatever helps.
Percentage of allocation between digital and offline, uh, it really depends in terms of the kind of year you're having, right? Either, and for us, markets are cyclical at the end of the day, right? There are good years and bad years, so your marketing spends typically move up and down with the way the market is,
Right.
right? So, given that situation, as far as we're concerned, digital really is our primary channel of advertising. So to that extent, it has a much larger share than non-digital channels. But I think one of the things that we should always look at in terms of ROI itself, right? And because at the end of the day, this is really about ROI. Is wherever I keep, when I talk to people or at conferences, I always keep hearing this line on digital is becoming expensive. There was an article yesterday or day before on in Economic Times on how digital is becoming expensive, and Omkar talked about 70 lakhs moving to 1.4 crores, right? So the thing which I'm unable to understand is in terms of based on what benchmark are we all arriving at is this conclusion that digital is expensive.
Right.
Because at the end of the day, digital is perhaps the only channel which gives you a very objective way of measuring ROI.
Sure.
Right? No other channel of advertising really gives you a very, very metric driven objective way of measuring ROI. So at the end of the day, expensive or not expensive needs to have a benchmark. Otherwise, it really doesn't make any sense. So that really is my response. When I go to the board for a budget, is forget ROI at the end of the day, because look, this is the only channel where you at least have a visible funnel in front of you.
Right.
Now, what you do with the funnel, what you do with your spends, at the end of the day, it depends on what business you're running, right? So for us, ultimately, it's cost of acquisition with revenue per customer. Really, that's really a very simple formula that we have.
Right.
Is what's our COA and what is the RPC that we look at per customer. On the B2C side,
Sure.
B2B side is different, right? On the B2C side, this is exactly what we look at. But the important element from our industry point of view is lifetime value, because at the end of the day, a customer is, this is not a credit card customer or a personal loan customer, right? You hope a personal loan customer takes a loan only once in a while, but he doesn't take it regularly. Different problem. But as far as mutual funds are concerned, you want to have customers who buy products repeatedly, right? And the more they buy, the more money you make out of that customer, right? So you need to blend an LTV metric into this, but ultimately it is COA and RPC that we look at. As of now, the economics is not adding up. But I don't think the reason is because digital is expensive.
Right.
The reason is because this is a longer term investment that you need to make. This is about engaging with customers, bringing the next million customers into products like mutual funds. And as you simplify the products, as you simplify the onboarding, ease of transaction, as you simplify content, communication, all of that, which has nothing to do with advertising, which got more to do with the ancillary activities of a business, you will find the ROI will come in.
Could you share a little bit about the ancillary, what support systems you're building?
So I think three very important elements that we see, right? Historically, mutual funds there's been a massive barrier to entry as far as customers are concerned, because 10 years ago, you want a mutual fund product. First, you need to build awareness, right? It's so complex, it's market, stock market, equity, entry load, exit load, all of that. People don't understand. Second thing is that I need someone to sell me a mutual fund. I need someone to come meet me, fix an appointment, sign in 5 different pages, give a check, then there's KYC, PAN card, other whatever, address proof, all of that, right? So I think clearly onboarding was a big challenge.
Sure.
That needs to be simplified, right? As an industry, I think we've taken massive steps in ensuring that the onboarding experience is faster, easier, and literally instant.
Right.
That's the first step. The second big step is in terms of simplifying product itself, right? Like I said earlier, I'm not very sure if customers understand large, mid, small, multi. At least in equity, it's simple. On the fixed income side, we have duration, opportunities, credit opportunities, bond opportunity. Forget the layman. A mutual fund guy doesn't understand. I can bet you on that, right? So the real challenge is in terms of simplifying products, right? And I think we have started that process with this heavy regulation coming in terms of product categorization. The future is very clear. Mutual fund products will get much more simplified. The third element is in terms of access, right? Can a customer really today, like again Omkar talked about in terms of search, you have an idea, you think of something, you're told about something, you pick up your handheld and you start searching for it, and you don't just search, you want to consume it, right? So I think the Amazon moment of mutual funds has arrived, right? With the advent of Paytms and ET Monies and Zerodhas and Bank Bazaars and all these guys coming in, and you also have the entire stack that AMCs are building in parallel directly also.
Right.
And you also have the banks who are moving in this direction. I think the Amazon moment has arrived, right? So with that coming in, you'll see this going a long way in terms of increasing penetration itself, right? So I genuinely believe that digital acquisition, digital transaction, instant fulfillment of mutual funds is here, and I think the scale up you'll see over the next 10-15 years is going to be massive. Obviously, there is a structural market economic view that is helping it, because there is a big shift from physical assets to financial assets that's happening. That's the fundamental shift. Otherwise, people will keep buying real estate and gold. That will not happen at least for another 10-15 years, the way the market cycle plays out. So that shift will help this, and I think the big game changer is digital as far as we are concerned.
I think we are moving towards that maturity. It will still take some time, but some of the players have started doing it, depending on what the price point is, and in very specific markets. It solely depends on to the product touch point. A luxury product may behave very differently compared to a more affordable product, which is like a piece of cake and everybody wants to grab it. And there's a limited time opportunity for that, right? So it depends on to the product and markets. But on top of what is being said right now is at our end, we have started doing certain studies, very smaller studies at our end in terms of the product launches or services when being launched. We have started looking at it. If we do digital campaigns, what's the footfall? Vis-a-vis when we don't do digital campaigns, and we have dragged it to very specific channels in digital space. When we do it with Google versus Facebook versus LinkedIn versus blah 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 native, all of that. So we have started living that data-based life in terms of, and that has helped, especially me, going back to the CEOs and to the promoters in terms of this is what happens if you spend 1 CR over here.
Right.
This is what you're going to see, not only directly through digital, but indirectly also. This is the footfall. And from there, the conversion and XYZ numbers, I think the brands are very clear about.
Right.
So we have done about 6 studies of that sort in last about a year and a half. And which has helped me, at least convince, secure, and move towards more in the digital transformation and the campaigns.
There are two questions of mine. Number one is the fact that, since the new NFO that is coming in tomorrow for Sundaram Equity Savings Funds, I wanted to know which was the most rewarding platform or the kind of ad type has been, the most suitable for Sundaram mutual funds. That is number one. And number two is how do you actually, break through the challenge of building the trust to a first-time investor who is, at the very nascent stage of investing in the, who are at the very starting stage of their mutual fund journey.
Sure.
So how do you actually break through that challenge?
We think it's easy, but I think again with the younger generation, I think you can't take it for granted.
Sure.
Right?
Sure.
They don't care what your brand name is. Right? They need to see it. They need to feel it. Right? So again, there are 2-3 ways of building trust. Content and engagement is perhaps the easiest way and the most efficient way of doing it, right? But it's not a single shot of doing it, right? You've got to do it over time. You've got to do it over longer periods of time, maybe 2 years, 3 years, and then you'll see this benefit playing out. But this has got to be backed. In our case, at least, I mean, may not be in the case of Vipin, but in our case, it's got to be backed with tangible product performance. At the end of the day, we are selling a mutual fund scheme, and the customer will like you or hate you based on the wealth he's created through you, right? So we can do all we want as far as acquiring a customer or engaging the customer and building the trust is concerned, but it's got to be backed with meeting the expectation of the customer with his wealth creation.
Basically, the fund performance that you guys...
It's very important,
so
right?
like
that tangibility is, you can never underestimate the value of fund performance. That's the first thing. So your first question in terms of which channel has worked, again, it depends what your metric for working is, right? Is your metric ROI, conversion, how many customers, how many sales, what sort of AUM you've got, right? So at this stage, the way we look at channels is still leads and conversions. Okay, at this point in time, that's what we look at. We are not really looking at ROI in terms of how much money a customer is invested, all of that, because that is phase 2, phase 3, right? So I think, performing channels like Google, Google Display, Google Search has worked very well for us, right? We've done some tactical initiatives with Social Beat and Google, and that's given us significant delta vis-a-vis earlier campaigns, right? What's also worked is in terms of building, bringing in some brand components also during specific periods like NFO, right? Because during specific periods of NFO, 2-week campaign, we've got multiple people selling us. It's about amplification, right? So that's really what the YouTube masthead gave us. Right?
It's been working
it gave
wonders.
us a massive lift in terms of visibility itself, right? But a masthead is not expected to give me leads and performance and sales. That's not the objective of masthead. The objective is to give me brand visibility and amplification of that, right? In that one day, and it gave us that, right? And if you look at the overall success of that campaign, it worked wonders for us because it was our third largest NFO itself, right? And this is after somebody, I think Omkar mentioned, we were doing this NFO after 8 years, right? And our most successful NFO was 11 years ago, right? So this kind of benchmarked ourselves with that NFO, with a completely different economics around it. Right? That NFO was a very different model. This NFO, the economics was very, very different. So it worked very well for us.
Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Thanks.
Vipin, maybe you could also share on the, you've done a lot of mastheads and roadblocks. How have they performed? I think YouTube worked very well for Sundaram.
So there is a visibility factor which is very much needed for any brand or product. Whatever we say, about ROI, or investing only in search or Facebook ads, or where it's a lead based campaign. But like I said earlier, we have done those studies when I'm doing a masthead or when I'm doing a complete takeover on any of the channels. How does it help us, the entire lead generation channel as well at the same time? We have seen the leads getting bumped up at that particular time and the CPL completely going down. Not only that, but it helps towards the end conversion and meeting towards the revenue goals. And when we have not done that, we have seen those numbers also. And yes, I do agree, those are expensive aspects of it. But like I said, if the product value is higher or it's a B2C large game, then that makes a lot of sense.
How have you guys used data intelligence, especially for upselling of products? So, for example, someone who might be investing in an equity hybrid fund might go ahead to invest in a sectoral theme as well. How have you guys worked on that?
So again, the real difference is in terms of content itself, right? So we know how many of those customers have invested in equity hybrid and you want to upsell them into some other fund. So you pick those segment of customers, you look at average age that they've been holding, and then you decide if you want to sell a certain product to that customer. But it's got to be communicated in such a way that it's built for that customer. For him, essentially you build a case for him to invest, right? A case for him to buy an alternate asset class or add an alternate asset class to his portfolio itself. So again, but these are not automated yet, right? I must confess that these campaigns are not automated. I would want this to eventually get to an automated stage, and we're again making steps towards completely automating this exercise. As of now, identification, figuring out what profile of customers these are, segment them, and then customize your communication to that extent. And then communication is great again, right? You can do infographics, you can do video, you can do WhatsApps with them. There are multiple ways of reaching them. You can do a ton of remarketing around that, right? So there are multiple ways of reaching out to those customers, right? You have custom segments that you can look at. So we've done some of these things. How the success of it, again, it depends what you're trying to communicate, right? I mean, because again, the challenge is in terms of he may have a large cap fund of some other asset management company, right? Again, there are ways that you can find out, but right, and that's really the challenge. I mean, that's the fun part of data, right? I mean, with data you can do a ton of things, right? So it's really the delta will come in terms of profiling and content that you want to communicate to the customer. It's got to be customized. It can't be mass, because the customer will find out if it's mass. You lose him if he knows that he's getting the same thing that a ton of other guys are getting.
Data is what going to decide as to how do you cross sell or how do you upsell.
I'm Preeti from HDFC Live. I have a very specific question. Has LinkedIn worked out for you in terms of lead generation and ROI, as in for anything other than branding? Because we've been experimenting with it for quite some time, and apart from recruitment and branding, it's not really an ROI platform for us.
Yes, it works. How you use it, you'll have to figure it out. We can speak offline maybe with some examples, but it works great where there is a longish content readability with respect to industry. I can vouch for it. It works brilliantly. That's the best platform to work in the IT industry. In case of finance, yes, there are possibilities of making it work. In case of real estate, I would say no, maybe. In case of pharma, great platform. I think one of the major, most important platforms, apart from very specific syndicated networks. So yeah, it works.
Has it worked for us? Yes and no, because we have not extensively used LinkedIn like how we've used other channels. We are figuring out LinkedIn because I think for us, the real challenge is in terms of the tail end, right? So because one is the lead gen part of it, and how are you going to fulfill these leads also is very critical, right? So I think there is an element of work that needs to be done at the fulfillment leg as well, right? If it's an assisted fulfillment or if it's a self fulfillment leg. So that's where we think the issue really is, right? So lead gen, it works. It really does work. You get really the leads that you want, right? But has it given us the conversions? Has it given us the lift in terms of conversions? Not yet. And but I don't think the real issue is in terms of LinkedIn per se. The real issue is perhaps on the tail end of the funnel in terms of how you fulfill these leads. Again, different channels need different levels of fulfillment, different types of fulfillment.
I think not only that one. I think platforms, each of the platform need to be not only looked at from the direct conversion, but also look at the attribution, what it can, how exactly it helps in terms of building up the entire funnel and the conversion, the final conversion. So I've seen multiple channels not directly converting, but when you do campaigns on different channels, one is very specific to lead generation, but the other one is kind of backing it up towards the attribution model. The results can be phenomenal.